Hey guys! Today we're diving into another truly horrifying case. If you want to support my channel, make sure to subscribe and stay active. It really helps me out. I'd be super grateful for that. Let's get started. Most people have their own secrets, hidden aspects of their lives that they would rather keep private. These concealed truths are often personal or family-related, and sometimes it's best for everyone if they remain undisclosed. A shocking crime involving a mother of multiple children sent waves of fear through the quiet, close-knit town of Deer Park, Washington. The tragic event became the most disturbing case in the town's history. The woman was known as a devoted member of her community, modest and respectable. But as investigators dug deeper into her private life, they uncovered unsettling secrets that expanded the list of potential suspects. Detectives found themselves unraveling a web of deception and intrigue, facing unexpected twists at every turn. And when the identity of the person responsible was finally revealed, the truth was even more shocking than anyone could have imagined. Shannon Caroline Starbuck, née Conway, was born on April 19, 1969, in the small town of Anderson, Indiana. She was the youngest of 3 siblings in a conservative and deeply religious family. Growing up with 2 older brothers who always looked out for her, she had a childhood filled with protection and care. When she was 8, her parents decided to part ways. Her mother, taking all 3 children with her, moved to sunny Florida, settling near the ocean. Not long after, she remarried a local church pastor who had lost his first wife and was raising 6 children of his own. The newly blended family moved into a large house, and before long, Shannon's mother and stepfather welcomed a child together, a daughter named Anna. Shannon grew up in a big, tight-knit household where everyone supported one another. She dreamed of one day having a large family of her own, a creative spirit. She did well in school, but wasn't particularly fond of math or science. Instead, she had a passion for art and knew from an early age that she wanted to become an artist or designer. Those who knew her described Shannon as outgoing, kind, and warm-hearted. After high school, she was accepted into a prestigious college and later continued her studies at a university in Tallahassee, where she earned a scholarship in design and decoration. Though she wasn't one for wild parties, she enjoyed being in the spotlight and had a wide circle of friends. In 1989, at the age of 20, Shannon met a young man named Clay Starbuck at church. He was 24, and there was an immediate connection between them. Clay Joshua Starbuck was born on February 10, 1965, in a rural town in Oregon. The eldest of 2 siblings, he grew up with his sister in a modest family. When he was 12, his family relocated to Alaska, where he later graduated high school, earned a degree in engineering, and secured a job in the industrial sector. For a time, Clay lived in Denver, where he got married and had 2 children. However, the marriage eventually fell apart, leading him to return to Alaska for a while. Then, in 1989, during a visit to relatives in Florida, he attended a Sunday church service, and that was when he first laid eyes on young Shannon. From the moment they met, there was an undeniable spark between them, and soon a romantic relationship blossomed. Shannon wasn't deterred by the fact that Clay had been through a divorce and was actively pursuing custody of his 2 children through the court system. Their shared faith strengthened their connection, and Clay quickly gained the approval of Shannon's mother. Likewise, his family fully supported his choice. In June 1990, just 8 months after they met, the couple officially tied the knot with a wedding in Florida. Afterward, they moved to Denver, where Clay successfully won custody of his children from his previous marriage. Shannon, deeply in love and overjoyed, welcomed them with open arms, treating them as her own. Clay worked as an engineer on an oil pipeline in Alaska, which required him to work on a rotational schedule, spending 1 month at home with his family, followed by a month at the job site. Shortly after their wedding, Shannon became pregnant, and in the summer of 1991, the couple welcomed their first child together, a son named Austin. 2.5 years later, she gave birth to another son, Blake, and in 1996, they welcomed a daughter, Logan. That same year, Shannon, now raising 3 biological and 2 stepchildren, decided to relocate to Valdez, Alaska to be closer to Clay and avoid long periods of separation. However, the drastic change in climate took a toll on the children's health, and they frequently fell ill, creating ongoing challenges for the family. Additionally, their youngest daughter was diagnosed with a developmental condition requiring specialized care and therapy. In 1998, the couple had another daughter, Serena. However, just a few months after her birth, Shannon, realizing that the family needed a more stable environment, returned to Denver with the children. Clay continued working on his rotational schedule, splitting his time between Alaska and Colorado. By 2000, their marriage had reached a breaking point when Shannon discovered Clay had been involved in a romantic relationship with a coworker in Valdez. The divorce process was far from amicable. Clay, in turn, accused Shannon of infidelity and inappropriate behavior, though she denied the claims. In the end, the court granted Shannon full custody of the children, as Clay's work schedule made it difficult for him to provide consistent care. After the divorce, Shannon, now 30, moved with her family to Phoenix, Arizona. Shortly after, she entered a new relationship with a man she had met online a few months prior. However, the relationship was rocky from the start. Frequent arguments and communication issues quickly led to tension. It didn't take long for their feelings to fade, and the couple eventually parted ways. Almost immediately after the breakup, Shannon reached out to Clay and suggested they try again. He didn't object, and soon the former spouses were living together once more, though they never legally remarried. In 2001, Shannon gave birth to another son, Marshall. Despite believing that the child had been conceived while Shannon was still involved with her previous partner, Clay chose to accept him as his own and gave him his last name. In 2006, the couple officially remarried for the second time and decided to purchase a home in the small rural town of Deer Park, Washington. With a population of just over 3,000 people, the town was quiet, picturesque, and had a low crime rate, an ideal place to raise a family and enjoy a peaceful life. In reality, little changed in their day-to-day routine. Shannon lived in their new home with the children, while Clay continued working on a rotational schedule, spending every other month away for work. Shannon quickly became part of the local community and took an active role in their church, where the entire family regularly attended services. However, the long separations, daily routines, and unresolved past grievances took a toll on their relationship once again. Both Shannon and Clay began seeing other people, and in 2010, they decided to divorce for the second time. By then, Clay's older children from his first marriage, as well as his and Shannon's eldest son, Austin, had already grown up and moved out, leaving Shannon with their 4 younger children. 6 months after the divorce, an unexpected event drastically changed the family's circumstances. While working at his job site in Valdez, Alaska, Clay suffered a serious back injury in a workplace accident, rendering him unable to continue working. Forced to return to Deer Park, he pleaded with Shannon to reconcile and move back in together, but she refused. Clay then purchased a small house just over a mile from his ex-wife's home so he could remain close to his children and stay involved in their lives. He was approved for disability benefits, but the payments weren't enough to cover child support, leading to frequent disagreements between him and Shannon. Their already strained relationship deteriorated even further. Still, they both made efforts to remain civil in front of the children to avoid causing them emotional distress. As Clay focused on recovering from his injury and undergoing rehabilitation, a large portion of his benefits went toward medical treatment. He dedicated nearly all his time to his children, driving them to school and sports practices, spending weekends with them and organizing activities to be the best father he could be. Meanwhile, 41-year-old Shannon was determined to rebuild her personal life and actively pursued new relationships. She created profiles on multiple dating websites, frequently exchanged messages with different men, went on regular dates, and was involved in multiple relationships at once. However, she was careful to keep her personal life private, maintaining the image of a devoted mother, a committed churchgoer, and a woman of modest values in the eyes of her neighbors and acquaintances. Facing financial challenges after her divorce, Shannon also looked for new career opportunities, and decided to enroll in a dental hygiene program, a field that promised a stable and lucrative income. She quickly excelled in her studies, earning top marks in her class and securing a position as an assistant at a local clinic, with the promise of full-time employment upon completing her training. Shannon was thrilled. Her life was transforming, and she was convinced that success awaited her in every aspect of her future. Clay occasionally brought up the idea of getting back together, promising Shannon his unwavering support and devotion for the rest of his life. However, she consistently turned him down. Since the divorce, Shannon had embraced a vibrant personal life, indulging in newfound freedoms she had previously restrained herself from. Among other things, she engaged in private online exchanges with various men, sharing personal photos and messages. On December 1st, 2011, the children waited patiently for their mother to pick them up from school, but she never arrived. This was highly unusual. Shannon had always been responsible when it came to her parental duties. Around 3 p.m., 16-year-old Blake sent her a text asking where she was and who would be picking them up, but he received no reply. Blake, along with Logan, Serena, and Marshall, grew increasingly worried when they couldn't reach Shannon by phone. Their calls went unanswered, and their messages remained unread. About 40 minutes later, a response finally came. Shannon texted Blake, saying that their father would be picking them up and asking them to wait a little longer. But as time passed, no one arrived. To make matters worse, Clay's phone was turned off. Another 30 minutes later, another text came from Shannon's phone, instructing them to contact their older brother, 20-year-old Austin, who lived on his own in the same town, and ask him to pick them up. Confused but concerned, Austin rushed to the school as soon as he could. He then drove his younger siblings to their father's house, as they had originally been scheduled to stay with him. When Clay learned that Shannon had failed to pick up the children, he was visibly surprised. He also claimed he had never received any messages from her. However, he then recalled that he had been feeling unwell earlier in the day and had taken a nap, turning off his phone and forgetting to switch it back on. When the children told him they still couldn't reach their mother, he reassured them, suggesting that she might simply be taking some time for herself and asked them not to worry for at least a few more hours. That evening, Serena and Blake had a sports event at the school stadium, where their parents, siblings, and friends were supposed to attend as supporters. But Shannon never showed up, and attempts to contact her remained unsuccessful. Concern grew among the family members, and once the event concluded, Clay and the children decided to drive to her house to check on her. When they arrived, they found Shannon's car parked in the driveway. No lights were on inside, and the house appeared empty. No one responded to their knocks or calls, and her phone was still turned off. Strangely, none of the children had a spare key with them, meaning they were unable to unlock the door and check inside. Clay assumed that Shannon had likely gone on a date and lost track of time. After all, she knew the children were spending the night at his place, so she may have taken the opportunity to relax. Reassuring them that everything was fine, he took them home as originally planned. However, when no one was able to reach Shannon the next morning or throughout the day on December 2nd, Clay and the children decided to report her absence to law enforcement. Clay called the police, explained the situation, and requested that officers check on her home. Around 6 p.m., 2 patrol officers arrived at Shannon's residence, but nothing seemed out of the ordinary. There were no signs of forced entry, no visible disturbance, and nothing that immediately suggested foul play. It appeared as though she had simply stepped out. Without any clear evidence of wrongdoing, the officers were unable to enter the home without a warrant, so they left. Around the same time, another call came in to the police, this time from Shannon's worried mother. She hadn't been able to reach her daughter for 2 days, and Clay and the children hadn't given her a clear answer about what was happening. The officers informed her that, at the moment, there was no urgent reason for concern, and decided to wait until morning to obtain a search warrant if necessary. It wasn't until the morning of December 3rd, at approximately 9:30 a.m., that officers finally entered Shannon's home. The house was eerily quiet. Everything appeared to be in place. No signs of struggle, no visible blood, nothing that immediately indicated a crime had occurred. That was until they reached the bedroom. The scene before them was deeply disturbing. one of the most shocking cases the investigators had ever encountered. Shannon's lifeless body lay on the bed. She was restrained, and a gag had been placed in her mouth. Her body was covered in extensive bruising, not from a single act of aggression, but from prolonged suffering. The perpetrator had staged the scene in a way that was both cruel and degrading, leaving behind items intended to humiliate the victim. It was evident that whoever was responsible for this crime not only wanted Shannon to suffer, but also sought to tarnish her reputation. She was known as a reserved and devout woman, and few, if any, knew of her private life. Later, forensic experts determined that Shannon had suffered nearly 100 separate injuries. She had multiple broken ribs, fractured fingers, and a crushed forearm. Her throat showed signs of repeated strangulation, inflicted both manually and with a fabric belt. There were also severe injuries, indicating forced aggression of an intimate nature. However, there were no open wounds or bloodstains at the scene. The official cause of death was mechanical asphyxiation. Based on the severity and nature of the injuries, investigators believed the perpetrator had ended Shannon's life by stepping on her throat. As for the exact time of her passing, experts could only estimate, as a heater had been running at full capacity in the room for days, affecting the rate of decomposition. Shannon was believed to have lost her life sometime between the afternoon of December 1st and midday on December 2nd. As soon as Shannon's body was discovered, the primary suspect immediately became her ex-husband. Law enforcement officers arrived at Clay's home, informed him of what had happened, and asked him to come down to the station for questioning. He appeared shocked upon hearing the news about the mother of his 5 children. Overcome with emotion, he broke down in tears, but readily agreed to cooperate with the investigation. During questioning, Clay insisted that he and Shannon had maintained a positive relationship after their divorce. He claimed they supported each other, co-parented well, and got along just fine. On the day she went missing, they had agreed that he would drop the children off at school in the morning and she would pick them up later and take them to their sports event in the evening, after which they would spend the night at his house. However, according to Clay, things didn't go as planned. That morning, his car unexpectedly broke down on the way, forcing him to call Shannon and ask her to take over. After making arrangements, he focused on fixing his vehicle. Later in the day, he began feeling unwell, took some pain relievers, and decided to lie down for a bit. He admitted that he had turned off his phone and then forgot to turn it back on, which was why he hadn't seen any of the messages that had been sent to him. Clay was open to answering all of the investigators' questions, appeared deeply distressed, and seemed eager to assist in any way possible. He voluntarily provided his fingerprints and a DNA sample, handed over the clothing and shoes he had worn that day, and allowed detectives to examine his phone. He even permitted officers to inspect his body for any injuries that might indicate a struggle. His children fully supported him, backing up his story without hesitation. They all insisted that their father would never harm anyone, let alone their mother, whom they believed he still cared about. According to them, everything had happened just as he described. Clay also pointed detectives in a new direction, suggesting that they should look into Shannon's dating life. He claimed that his ex-wife had been actively meeting men through dating websites, and that she didn't even try to hide it. According to him, she often invited these men over while the children were at school. In Clay's opinion, the person responsible for the crime was likely someone she had recently been involved with. Investigators seized Shannon's phone and laptop, and what they found raised serious concerns. She had active profiles on 3 popular dating websites, where she frequently exchanged messages with various men and shared personal photos. Detectives also discovered that she had been seeing multiple partners at the same time, and 2 of them immediately stood out as potential suspects. One of them was a man named Tom Walker. He had repeatedly asked Shannon to send him personal photos using adult accessories and had detailed, graphic conversations about how he wanted to treat her and punish her harshly. Most notably, Shannon had been messaging him on the morning of December 1st, arranging to meet up on Saturday, December 3rd. The authorities had no trouble locating Tom Walker since he had used his real name on the dating site, and his number was saved in Shannon's phone. He was visibly shocked when informed of her passing, but adamantly denied any involvement. He voluntarily provided a DNA sample and presented a solid alibi. On December 1st, he had been at work the entire day, then attended a family event in another city, only returning home on the morning of December 3rd. Once his statements were confirmed, investigators ruled him out as a suspect and released him. As detectives continued reviewing Shannon's contacts and messages, they discovered another man, John Wilson, with whom she had been romantically involved. She had planned to meet him on the day of the crime. However, tracking him down proved difficult. First, he had used a fake name. Second, the photos on his dating profile weren't actually his. And third, he always called Shannon himself, using different payphones each time. Finding this individual took time, but investigators eventually identified him through a work computer he had used to communicate with her. When law enforcement confronted him, he appeared shocked and even more terrified upon learning why he was being questioned. He admitted that his real name was John Kenline and explained that he had taken such precautions because he was married and didn't want his affairs to ruin his family life. John told investigators that he had met Shannon 2 months before the incident. According to him, she wasn't looking for anything serious, and their arrangement consisted of occasional private meetups. He always initiated contact when he was certain he could visit, without raising suspicions at home. On December 1st, around noon, John drove to Shannon's house for one of their usual meetings, knowing she would be alone while her children were at school. However, when he knocked on the door, no one answered. He then called her from a nearby payphone, but she still didn't pick up. Later that evening, he returned to her home, but once again, there was no response, and his messages went unread. Although detectives had 2 potential suspects, their instincts told them they needed to take a closer look at Shannon's ex-husband, Clay. He had a clear motive, and his behavior seemed increasingly suspicious. However, his children remained steadfast in defending him, insisting he was incapable of harming anyone. Clay maintained his original story, that his car broke down on the way to school on December 1st, forcing him to ask Shannon to handle the drop-off. When pressed to specify exactly where the breakdown occurred, he hesitated before eventually naming a local park. However, he hadn't considered one crucial detail. Every road leading to that area was equipped with surveillance cameras. Investigators reviewed the footage, but strangely, Clay's vehicle never appeared on any of the cameras. Additionally, he claimed to have turned off his phone to rest, something he said he had done many times before. However, data records painted a different picture. An analysis of his phone history showed that he had almost never turned off his device, except for a couple of rare occasions over the past year, both times due to a dead battery. Even then, his phone had only been off for about an hour at most. This time, however, it had remained inactive from 9 a.m. until nearly 4 p.m., a time frame that raised even more questions. Moreover, investigators soon discovered that Clay had a spare key to Shannon's house, yet he never used it when she unexpectedly stopped responding to messages. During the initial questioning, he even denied having a duplicate key. This raised serious suspicions, and in subsequent interviews, his statements became inconsistent and contradictory. When authorities seized Clay's home computer, they found spyware installed, which he had used to monitor Shannon's private messages and track her phone calls. He knew the names of all the men she had been involved with, was aware of her upcoming dates in advance, and had access to the personal photos she had shared with them. It was also revealed that Clay had shown some of these messages and photos to his children, attempting to turn them against their mother by portraying her as immoral and untrustworthy. The situation escalated to the point where the children even considered moving in with him, which had led to frequent arguments within the family. After Shannon rejected Clay's repeated requests to reconcile, he grew resentful and started planning his revenge. He carefully studied her contacts, selecting which of her romantic partners he could potentially frame for the crime while also constructing his own alibi. He deliberately lured Shannon out of the house by falsely claiming his car had broken down. While she was away, he used his spare key to enter and waited for her return, trapping her inside. For over 5 hours, Clay subjected his ex-wife to severe mistreatment, showing little concern about leaving behind evidence. Since he had frequently visited the house, his fingerprints and DNA at the scene could be easily explained. His actions weren't just about inflicting harm, he also sought to degrade her, intentionally leaving behind certain personal items to tarnish her reputation even after her passing. On February 6, 2012, Clay Starbuck was arrested and charged with premeditated aggravated homicide, torture, assault of an intimate nature, and unlawful entry. While much of the evidence against him was circumstantial, the overwhelming amount of incriminating details was enough to bring the case to trial. Due to the severity of the charges, he faced the possibility of the death penalty. The trial began in the spring of 2013 and turned out to be highly complex. Clay's defense team argued that his prior back injury would have made it physically impossible for him to overpower Shannon. Furthermore, his children testified in his defense, painting their mother in a negative light, and insisting that one of her many romantic partners must have been responsible. They believed their father had been framed. On June 8, 2013, Clay was found guilty on all counts. He was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Additionally, the court prohibited him from contacting his younger children until they reached adulthood. Thanks for watching, everyone. Your support means a lot to me, and you can help my channel grow by hitting that like button, dropping a comment, and sharing this video. Your engagement really makes a difference. See you soon.